Okay, it's about 1:38 on Monday, February 9th, 2026. And I am calling the February 9th meeting of the Crime Victims Compensation Board to order. It's my understanding all 5 board members are present, participating remotely in this meeting. First order of business is a review of the draft minutes from January 12th, 2026. I have reviewed the draft. I have no comments, questions, or edits. Any other thoughts, folks?
No, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Hearing no dissent, then I would make a motion that we approve as written the draft January 12th, 2026 board meeting minutes. Can you either affirm, is there a second for that motion?
Second.
I'll second it.
And can you affirm either audibly or by raising a hand that you approve the minutes as written?
Approve.
Okay, it appears to be unanimous. Next order of business appears to be the compensation program report. Who do we have? Anna?
Yes, that would be me. Good afternoon, everyone. Just a heads up, I am at home, so I just have my laptop, so I'm working with just one screen today, so please bear with me for any technical difficulties. But I will go ahead and start sharing my screen, which I'm not oh, there it is, sorry. Oh, so sharing's not turned on, Melly.
Oh, I'm sorry, Anna. Hold on a sec.
I just sent a request to be co-host.
Yep, I think you're all set.
Let's see. All right. Okay, can everybody see the board report?
Yes.
Yes, all right, fantastic. Okay, so for January of 2026, our top spending categories were aggravated assault at $9,974.75, followed by domestic assault at $8,776.44, and then followed by homicide at $5,752.07. We made a total of 58 payments on 32 claims for a total of $42,342.11. It was kind of a not as large amount for the sexual assault program for this month. There's a total of 2 payments made on 2 claims totaling $500. The total for January of 2026 for both programs was 60 payments on 34 claims totaling $42,842.11. And if anyone has any questions at this point, just feel free to interrupt. I have one screen, so I can't see everybody, so just feel free to chime in at any point. For our spending categories, our top spending category for January was medical facility at $9,360.34. That was followed by loss of support at $8,031.88, followed by lost wages at $7,227.74. For the sexual assault program, as I mentioned earlier, there was 2 payments made on 2 claims for counseling at $500, and there were no other payments made on any of the other sexual assault categories. Any questions before I move on to year to date? Nope. I apologize. That's my dog. All right. So for year to date, for FY26, our top spending category so far this year has been domestic assault, totaling $91,554.43. In comparison to last year, $56,472.57. That's trending with what we're seeing across the rest of the country. There has definitely been an increase in gender-based violence, specifically domestic assault. Followed by homicide at $65,522.77 in comparison to last year at $58,880.59. And thirdly was aggravated assault at $65,074.20 in comparison to $29,711.65. So definitely spending more in that category than we were last year. So far, we have made 471 payments on 151 claims, totaling $294,943.42. In comparison to last year at 197,375.91. For the sexual assault program, so far they have made 43 payments on 25 claims, totaling $61,011.82 in comparison to $45,305.96 last year. Total for both programs so far this fiscal year has been $355,955.24. I apologize. In comparison to $242,681.87 for last year. Spending categories so far, our top spending category is lost wages at $59,934.44 in comparison to last year, $18,127.80. Followed by medical facility at $54,767.45 in comparison to $36,437.60 last year. And then thirdly is funeral at $48,527.55 in comparison to last year, $42,267.95. So that's remained pretty consistent, at least funeral has. Sexual assault program so far has spent for counseling $2,565, followed by follow-up treatment $513.01. Followed by HIV prophylaxis at $916.38, and initial sexual assault exam $57,017.43. Any questions before I move on to claims by county? No? All right.
Questions?
Okay, so for the month of January, the compensation program received 29 claims, 3 from Addison, 12 from Chittenden, 3 from Franklin, 3 from Lamoille, 2 from Rutland, 2 Washington, 1 Wyndham, and 3 Windsor. Did not receive any claims from Bennington, Caledonia, Essex, Grand Isle, Orange, or Orleans counties. We received 29 compensation applications in comparison to 26 last January for an 11.54% increase. Year to date, we've received 233 claims in comparison to 253 last year for a 7.91% decrease, but still pretty consistent. The sexual assault program received 19 claims in comparison to 11 last year for a 72.72 increase. So far this fiscal year, they've received 103 claims in comparison to 130 last year for a 20.77% decrease.
I have a question.
Yeah, of
Excuse me. So the ones that you listed that you didn't receive any claims, I think it was Grand Isle,
Yes.
Bennington, Caledonia.
Yeah.
When was the last online training they got from the center, victim advocates there?
I'm not sure of the specific counties, but we have been offering trainings for new advocates at least quarterly, but when new people are hired, we will pretty much offer trainings whenever they're requested. But specifically Grand Isle, I'm not entirely sure. We typically don't see a lot of claims from Grand Isle in general.
No,
but
it's always been a problem.
yeah,
But
our
I'm just-
last advocate training was Christine might know the answer to this. I can't quite remember, but we did have one recently.
You did, okay. And are they mandated, even the ones that have been there, let's say, refresher course every whatever months or year?
I don't believe we mandate it, but we definitely do encourage our advocates to attend trainings if they feel like they do need a refresher course. But we are in pretty regular communication with our advocates. If there are any questions, they can reach out to us directly for any clarification they might need.
Yeah, it's nothing on you guys at all. It's just this comes up every once in a while, and maybe I'm the one that brings it up, but it just astounds me. Bennington didn't file,
I know we usually get quite a few from Bennington.
Always 0, but
yeah,
Bennington, that's just.
Anna, Jen has her hand
Oh,
up.
yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Ted.
I was just going to jump in that, we have 0 authority over and we're reminded of this often, over the State's Attorney's Advocates. So the comp team is great about offering it. How that turns out, we don't know.
Yeah.
It is what it is, but I can say that for the counties that they're talking about, those advocates have been sitting in those positions for a while. And yes, it is concerning,
Yeah.
but the comp team is doing the best that they can.
Yeah. Oh, it's nothing on them, Jen, at all. I know this is a recurring theme with these counties, and it's just it's really too bad for the survivors out there, you know? So
Well, things shifted when the center no longer provided the funding. So that changed a lot of what the training looked like and the orientation and such.
thank you.
And then we could just take a peek at our year to date. We can actually take a look at Grand Isle. So far for this fiscal year, we've received one claim from Grand Isle. But so far, this fiscal year, 233 claims thus far. Okay. And if there are no additional questions, I'll go ahead and stop sharing and pass it on to restitution.
I did want to just add, I
Oh.
should have added this before, that on a quarterly basis, we do provide our numbers to the central office so that they see exactly how many claims are coming, both not just comp claims, but restitution judgment orders and cases. So they're aware of counties that never have anything. And so we're sharing that information on a quarterly basis. And I appreciate comp and restitution doing that.
Jen, what do you mean by central office?
The Department of State's Attorneys and Sheriffs.
Yeah, okay.
So
that's what I'm-
they supervise the advocates, and we share this information on a quarterly basis so they can see how many, again, how many RJOs are being processed and how many comp claims are being processed. So they should be well aware of the fact that some counties don't seem to have victims that qualify for compensation or restitution.
Okay, so shall we move on to the restitution report? Michelle, are you doing that?
Okay, so you should be seeing the RU board summary.
Mhm.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I'm sorry, I've got a cold, so if I sound a little funny or I have to step away for a second, I apologize. So for the month of January, the collectors brought in just over $52,000. So every year we set a fiscal goal that we would like to achieve. So this year is $600,000. So each month we have to bring in at least $50,000 to hit that. And so we were over our set goal by $2,400. So that's great. In addition to that, we brought in $7,137.61 in tax money. That compares to just shy of $400 last year. So it's already a pretty good jump on the tax season for us and what we're bringing in. If you look down sort of the middle part of the sheet there, you can see that we paid out just over $15,000 from our fund to individual victims of crime. That's down a little bit from last year. That was $19,000 last year that we were able to advance for the same month. Year to date, we're at $180,000, almost $181,000 that we've been able to advance. Most of our money does come into us and go back out, as you can see, from the non-fund and the old case payment. So that's definitely a bigger chunk of the money that we pay out each month. The two victim liaisons made a total of 200 payments to victims. That's a little bit lower than it typically has been. Last month, it was well over 300 payments. Sometimes it just depends on the number of businesses that we're sending out payments to, individuals. Sometimes we're just trying to play a little catch up and some more payments go out. Any questions with any of that? Okay, let me see. Stop sharing and find my other one here. Okay. you should be seeing the January restitution judgment order form. So we had 146 new orders last month. That's the second highest month so far this fiscal year, and quite a jump from last month when we had 106. I will note, you'll see that Chittenden has 73 orders, so they're obviously always the highest, but compared to 37 last month. A big chunk of that, though, is there was a few offenders who had multiple restitution judgment orders. So one had 9 and one had 14. Same thing with Franklin County. So Franklin County 30 is the second highest. They had 26 last month. But we're sort of seeing the same trend with Franklin County, where there's a few offenders with, 13, 14 restitution judgment orders that really make up a good bulk of what we're seeing from those counties. A lot of them are retail theft cases, often the same businesses, such as like Walmart, Target, Home Depot, places like that. So that's, again, definitely a trend that we've seen over the last few years. Is again an increase in those retail theft, and the same businesses being targeted over and over by the same individual. Otherwise,
Michelle, can I interrupt for a minute? This is mostly for my benefit because I'm far less familiar with the state system than the federal system, where restitution is required in the vast majority of cases, and the court has no discretion not to order restitution, and prosecutors have no discretion in not seeking restitution on the federal side. Do I understand that there's much more discretion lodged in the state's attorneys and in the courts themselves to order or not order restitution in individual cases? Does anyone know the answer to that?
So I don't know if it's so much discretion. I mean, I certainly would say we definitely, and maybe Susie, you can talk to this too, but we definitely see a lot of cases where there should be restitution orders where there's just not. So sometimes they'll just dismiss all of the counts, and so there's like nothing being there's no conviction in anything. So even though they can order restitution, they may not. I see it a lot when a probation officer will reach out about, certain offenders, and that they have a lot of domestic assault or simple assault, and there's no restitution being ordered on any of those dockets, which is always alarming to me. So I don't know if someone's just dropping the ball, if the victims just are not responding, but generally we see a lot of restitution, but I would say there's definitely a fair number of cases where we're not seeing it for whatever reason.
Jen, do you know if the central office, the office of the state's attorneys and sheriffs, leans on the local state's attorneys to seek restitution? My guess is sometimes they may be plea bargained away restitution rights or obligations in connection with determining an incarceratory sentence or not. Do you have any insight into that?
It's definitely a bargaining chip, but I do feel that the central office, the director, Tim Levers-Dumont, is very supportive of us. He's been great, but he's managing, he's herding cats who are all elected officials, and they're going to do what they're going to do at the end of the day. So I do feel we're well supported by him and his staff, but he can only do what he can do, and they have their discretion, and they operate their offices differently. All 14 offices are different.
And of course, we have no authority or power over them.
No, we don't. We can just bring it to the powers that be at the legislature with frustration about how restitution is ordered. But ultimately, it's up to those individual elected officials. But I do feel that we're well supported by the central office as best as possible.
Okay, good.
Any other questions? Great. Well, thank you. And again, I'm glad you all got to meet Stefan. Again, he does go by Steph here. He's been a great addition so far. One thing we've noticed, we've been a staff of all women for a while, and it's interesting how offenders respond a little bit differently He's already had a couple people go, "Hey, I think I could have a beer with you." I'm like, I've never gotten that in my life from an offender. It's a very different relationship sometimes. So yeah, he's again definitely been a good addition.
Okay, well, thank you. Moving on to financial report. Do we have Carol?
You do. Let me share.
Are things still grim?
Well, they certainly didn't change. Alrighty, so hopefully you can see where we're started here. Always like to start with where are we at? What are our forecasting and our projections? We have the month of January. You can see that currently, although the compensation fund is actually doing a little better than it did last fiscal year at this time, we still have a projected deficit of about 509,000. Restitution, again, about 57,000 below what they were at last year. We're anticipating about a $23,000 deficit. And the domestic and sexual violence, pretty close to last year, I'd say, and again, around 345. So again, this is just calculating the average of what we've been taking in on a monthly basis, compared to how many remaining months we have in this fiscal year and where we believe that our budget will be. So not great news, but it is the news that you've been hearing for a while. The fund sum balances, however, this is again what we're, when we really look at our funding. Remember, I'm building a budget on the annual basis, but this is what we're really looking at. So we're looking at the comp fund, which is actually doing relatively well. You've seen this in my board notes, that the reason why the fund is doing well is because we've really utilized as much federal dollars as we can to support compensation claim payments directly to victims. So felt it was important under the current administration and the unknowns of granting to really use up what we had to build up our compensation fund. So that's what we've done. Does look healthy. We are now using compensation state dollars to support victim payments. So you will see this balance come down as we continue through the next 5 months or so to support victims' payments directly with state dollars. I've been working with Christine. We've been working on the state certification form. What that is the form that basically lets us know what we're going to be getting in federal funds based on the amount of state dollars that we've used. So it's a form that you do where you show how much you've used for federal and state dollars. And that essentially is what's required for us to receive those federal dollars. So that's due here this month. And we have that pretty much completed. So we'll have that ready. Restitution, as you all know, that's the one that has declined. But again, it still has a positive balance as far as the cash fund balance. The DVSB fund is showing a negative balance. Again, that's a particular fund that gets quarterly grant payments are paid out. So what often happens that we see with the DVSB fund is the fact that because we pay these large grant payments out in January, essentially, we often see that cash fund balance is a negative. And then we'll have 2 months to kind of build it up again before the next grant payment. So as we saw in the projections, we do anticipate that fund to have a deficit in revenues. But at this point, I also like to explain why it is negative at this point in time, because you may very well see by the next month or so that it no longer is in the negative. And that would be why, because we only pay grant payments on a quarterly basis. Federal money, don't get concerned about that. What this is just when I do federal drawdowns, it's a timing issue. So when you see that big negative number, it's merely because the amounts that I drew down from the feds haven't hit the books as revenue. So that's partly what that is. So again, overall, we're seeing those same numbers across the board, where we are for our expenses and our revenues. for year to date and then budget appropriations. I won't get into too much more detail unless you have specific questions. Nope. Making it easy on me. Good. All
Okay,
right.
it's time for Jen's report.
Sure.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you.
Hello all. Again, sorry my computer was being a little bit wonky, so I had to go through the whole Zoom re-download process again. So legislature's back in business, and that means that I am past capacity by like 8,000 trillion times over. It's been very busy, which is good because it would be really bad if we were not as involved as we are. But generally, I'm testifying at least 3 times a week, which means I'm also having to track all of those bills. A lot of good action, though, on issues that we care about, improving victim notification, looking yet again at establishing a better forensic system of care for individuals who are found incompetent or not guilty by reason of insanity. Looking at sextortion, which passed out of the House, creating a new crime that we didn't have, improving the protections for young people in terms of hearsay statements for out of court statements. That got passed as well. That's been something we've been championing for a while. Changing the process in diversion cases to have records be sealed and not expunged. If they're expunged, they go away forever. If they're sealed, criminal justice agencies still have access to them. Looking at public access to or internet access to records as well, and trying to make sure that victims have a voice in that in terms of their privacy rights. And also looking at licensing of massage parlors and people that provide those services, because that's an area where trafficking is becoming quite prevalent in Vermont, and there's no oversight over the people that provide those services. So that's another bill that we've been involved in quite recently. And then, the budget. Carol and I went in last week to testify on that, to start that process. We'll testify tomorrow also in House Judiciary on that. One of the areas that seemed to get some interesting traction in appropriations is hopefully a more long-term solution. You've heard from Carol that despite all of her like superwoman efforts, we are doing the best that we can and still haven't had to make cuts. But one of the pieces I'm hoping to push, and again, appropriations was interested in this, was that we adopt a system that looks like what Hawaii has. Hawaii has an order of payment that goes out, a priority of payment that goes out in terms of how fees and fines are collected and then where they go first. We have about 10 different, maybe a dozen different fees and fines that somebody who's been convicted of a crime is responsible for. And having spoken with the courts about 2 years ago, they have no clue how that looks because they just hand it over to their collection agency. And I know our RU staff work with offenders, and the person's like, I thought I paid that. I thought I paid that. But that could be the supervision fee for DOC, could be for the Defender General's office. It could be for the courts. It could be for the technology fee that is charged. So there are so many different fees and fines, and trying to get a sense of what those look like and then what is a priority we think could actually make some change. I know in Hawaii, making payments to funds that support victims and survivors, those are the top ones. And so there was interest in appropriations, and I'm hoping that Judiciary will make that a priority for them. We could beg and borrow and plead for one-time funds. That's a Band-Aid. And in this climate right now with people, lacking food, lacking housing, I'm not optimistic But I do think if we could get together and have this conversation and think about a structure, that would benefit us for the long term. So that's one of the major pushes that we're making in terms of our budget, to try and identify long-term solutions rather than just go in and say, we need, this many hundred thousands of dollars. And hopefully they'll listen to that. And also we're planning for Crime Victims' Rights Week in April. So trying to do that, even though we don't have a theme. So we don't know what we're supposed to plan for. The federal government's a little behind the 8 ball on that. So we're still moving ahead, and we're going to try and go general because that's what we've been generally told to do. So that's our signature event. Greg, every year since I can remember, we've always held an event on Friday of Crime Victims' Rights Week, which would be April 24th this year. That's a conference event for all providers, and also we do a listeners forum as well. And we're going to hold it this year in Brattleboro. We've done it in Montpelier. We've done it in South Burlington before as well. So we're going to have it in Brattleboro. So details to be finalized, but working on that.
Jen, I have a
Anything
couple
else? Any questions?
I have
Richard?
a couple of questions. Jen, is there, you cited the Hawaiian model of prioritizing categories of restitution payments. They have evidence that that's a more efficient way to, if you get a higher percentage of the total requested restitution from the population involved than other places, or what
Well,
makes that a good choice? I see.
Well, one of the pieces that we can't figure out, and we've asked Joint Fiscal Office to help us with, and they can't answer it either, is that while our special funds have been declining for well over 15 years, the special fund that goes to the special investigation units has doubled. So somehow, while ours has been declining, that particular fund has doubled. So we've asked, and I asked the courts, and they said, we have no idea. They don't know how the funds are collected. They don't know how they are parsed out. They have no, so my inclination is to tell me that I'm no math wizard, but to say that if something were set up to say you pay the restitution fund first, you pay comp fund second, or whatever order it would be, that we do better because the SIU fund somehow doubled when we have a 47% decline. So it would seem there's a better way to do things and a more efficient way to do things. And also just thinking about, again, making it a little bit more clear for offenders as well, because they're confused because they don't know who they're paying. They're just paying the $20 and then they're like, oh, why are you asking me restitution unit? And again, it's philosophically, it's concerning to me that, for example, the Department of Corrections gets money for supervision fees from the people that they are supervising. That's a state function. So I just have that as a concern, is what do we ask? So I'm hoping that if we can have this conversation during the off session, it will help to spur interest in a new model. I know there's a lot of concern about what we're asking people who, in Vermont, most everybody goes back out into the community. So if we're not setting people up for success as best as possible, for me, I think that the state should take over all this stuff. But if they're not going to, then what are we asking people to pay for when we're trying to also expect that they have a second chance at success? So I think there are some pieces for me that should be low level or low priority. And that starts with paying state agencies that get over $230 million in general funds, $20 a month for supervision.
The
Richard,
other
did you
question
have
was,
a question?
you said you were asked to keep the theme for the Crime Victims Week general. What that means And who was telling you to do that?
The Department of Justice has basically sent, the only message they've sent is that this is to be for all victims of crime, not any particular subset. So it has to be for all victims. So a lot of times we try and respond to the field if there's interest in a certain area, but what we're generally going to try and do is just focus on victims' rights altogether. So there's a lot of interest, for example, in our state about human trafficking. That doesn't feel like an area we can pursue with the current directive as we know it. But yeah, we don't have any. Normally we get the logo, the colors that we're supposed to use, all these different pieces, and we have nothing other than to make sure that it's an event that all victims, that targets all victims.
Jen, you kind of lost me talking about this directive and parsing out what it encourages or discourages us from talking about. I don't really understand this process then.
Sure. Well, again, the Department of Justice every year puts out what the theme is to be for Crime Victims' Rights Week. And we usually use the colors, we use the logos that we're supposed to use, and we promote that theme insofar as we use it to guide our thoughts for our annual event, as well as any other pieces that might be attendant that week. And what we've been told this year, and also in order to get funding for it, is all we've been told is the event has to be an event that targets and involves all victims of crime. So in the past, again, we've responded to the field if there's been interest in a particular, generally it's a particular
What'd you
subtype
do?
of victims. We were thinking about trafficking this year because it is of interest to Vermonters right now. But it didn't feel like we could go in that direction. So we're going to focus on victims' rights broadly, which isn't a bad thing because we're one of 11 states that does not have a Victims' Bill of Rights in our Constitution. So not a bad thing. It's just making it a little bit challenging to promote what we don't really know ultimately it will look like.
So do I gather that the vibe you're getting from, and I assume you're talking about the U.S. Department of Justice, right?
Yes.
Is the vibe you're getting this year different from the vibe you got last year, shortly after the administration changed?
Very much so. We've never had this happen where we haven't known at this point what the theme is, what the again, usually it's a very well rolled out process, and we have not received anything to date. So, we need the funding to support the event. And it's it's a little bit, we're approaching it with some trepidation, but we think we've identified a safe course.
So we should probably
sorry.
steer clear of focusing on Vermont victims of Jeffrey Epstein.
Yes, yes, we should. That would not be a good one.
Got it.
Jody put a link in the chat for anybody who was interested in. This is basically, I believe, the only information that we have. It just tells us what the week is, when it is. That's it. But feel free to go. And thanks, Jody.
Any other questions of Jen, or Jen, do you have anything more to report?
No, I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Jen, for the update,
Thanks.
and good luck.
Thanks.
Do any board members or center participants at this meeting have any comments or questions? Or do any members of the public who might be attending this this meeting have any comments or questions?
No, there's no one from the public here.
Okay.
So,
Anybody else have something to weigh in on? I hear a deafening silence, so I would make a motion that we adjourn the public meeting of the February 9th board meeting and go into deliberative session to address the two applications that are before the board. Is there a second?